Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Ohio Huntsman podcast, and hopefully there's a bunch of happy hunters out there because you had some success on opening weekend. This is actually the Friday before, so the day before opening day of archery season. I'm trying to get everything done with the podcast to release on Tuesday so that I've got the weekend to hunt, and we've got 2 hunts planned. Jacob and I are going out to Grandpa's farm on Saturday evening, and then we did get drawn for one of the parks hunts, so we're going to go do that Sunday. So hopefully by the time you're listening to this, maybe you've seen some posts on some successful hunts or some failed hunts. We'll see. If you weren't successful and you're maybe looking for a lucky charm, I would encourage you to go to our website, ohiohuntsman.com, and check out some of our apparel or some of our decals. I've been told by many a people that they're a good luck charm, so maybe it'll work for you, maybe it won't, but if it doesn't, you still get a cool shirt or a cool decal out of it, so maybe give that a look and give that a try. So this episode is maybe a little late, maybe not. We talk about hunting small game without messing up your deer hunting. So we're already into the beginning of season. Small game seasons have been open already. How do you hunt small game without messing up your deer hunting? You know, you hear a lot of people talk about, oh, you got to stay out of the woods, stay out of your hunting property, you're going to blow all the deer out of there, yada, 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 right? So how do you enjoy the outdoors either before deer season comes in or during deer season, but you know, you just want to go squirrel hunting versus deer hunting or whatever the case may be. So how do you have your cake and eat it too, I guess, basically is what we talk about on this one. So what sort of prompted this one is we recently did a dove hunt out at our grandpa's farm, and you know, those are the same woods and areas that we deer hunt. And so how do you do both? How do you not mess up your deer hunting but still enjoy some small game hunting? So that's what we talk about on this one. Hopefully it's helpful. Hopefully you guys find some tips in there, and hopefully you enjoy the episode. Before we get into that, I want to talk about our sponsor, Mastin's Deer Sense. So they are the newer of our 2 sponsors. They've been with us for a while now, but we're really looking forward to using some of the Mastin's products this fall. So they're a premium deer scent product, premium deer scent company. Prices are awesome. You guys have heard me talk about that stuff before. But what I really like about Mastin's is it's not just your typical scent in a bottle or scent in a jar, right? They've got scented gel crystals. They've got what they call their double scent stacker. So you put a scented candle, a deer scented candle, or they've got a bunch of different scented candle flavors, scents, if you will. You put it down in the bottom of this cylinder, you light the candle, and then above it, you put a tray. It's got a tray of liquid scent. And so, hence the name scent stacker. You can layer scents, right? So you can have they have a scent that's called Smell Like a Deer, and you could also have their Fighting Mad scent. And you can kind of layer things. The candle heats the scent, so it disperses better. Maybe makes it more realistic. I don't know the science behind that. But it seems like a warmed scent would carry better. It's like if you've ever been, or if your wife's ever been to, and I don't even know if these are still a thing, but the Scentsy parties, right? It's got a little light bulb inside, and then you put a wax puck or a wax cube in the tray, and it melts, and then the scent disperses throughout your house, sort of like a candle without the flame. This one is a scented candle with a liquid scent on top. You can layer scents. And so I guess what I'm getting at is they've got different product, right? It's not just liquid scent. They have liquid scent, and you can use it the same ways you always use liquid scents for scent drags and hanging scent wicks and all of that stuff. But they've also got some of these other more unique options. So I just wanted to talk about them for a minute, and now we're going to get into the episode. Welcome to the Ohio Huntsman Podcast, where three brothers, Jason, Jacob, and Jeff, discuss all things hunting in Ohio. Our goal is to be your source for accurate and reliable hunting news and conservation issues in the great state of Ohio, as well as some fun and interesting conversations along the way. This is the Ohio Huntsman Podcast.
Are you listening?
So what have you guys been up to? Jeff, you just got back from vacation, right?
Yeah. Well, I broke my squirrel gun.
You broke your squirrel gun? That wasn't a vacation thing, was it?
No. That was the day after I came home. I went out and just for a little short walk in the woods and dropped the gun, and the scope busted off of it.
So
that
the gun broke or the scope mount broke?
A little bit of both.
Oh.
Sort of. Like.
So it chipped the dovetail or whatever where it mounts?
Yes.
Okay.
And also, I don't know how it happened exactly. But it chipped the dovetail and kind of bent the mount off, bent it out so that the scope could pop off.
So is it foobarred or is it going to be fixable?
I mean, it's going to be fixable. I'm probably, I don't know, probably should invest in a better scope. Really?
Yeah.
Because it's just a cheap Tasco scope, but it got the job done. I didn't really need anything fancy.
Yeah.
But
I got a scope for sale. It's a scope that came off my 30-06 when I bought it. That it's one of those rocker scopes, and it doesn't shoot straight. So you can buy that from me.
He'll give you a heck of a deal on it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. No, it's just a terrible design because it'd probably be fine on a 22, but because it's that rocker scope, the recoil from the 30-06 moved it. It moves. You know what I mean? It doesn't lock tight enough. When it locks down onto the dovetail or whatever, the scope mount, it moves. You can move it.
Because it's got a hinge mechanism in it to where you can roll the scope out of the way and use the iron sights.
Yes. And whatever.
And that hinge mechanism is worn out or loose or something?
I guess. I mean, it doesn't just fall open. It's just it doesn't lock down absolutely tight enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, like I said, for a 22, if you don't bump it around, it probably would be fine. But the recoil from the 30-06, it would never repeat because it would move. But I don't know.
I'm down to my last little bit of deer jerky. I discovered a few more packs, 3 more packs in the bottom of my freezer. So I'm feverishly consuming my last little bit of deer jerky because it just feels like bad juju to go into deer season with jerky left over from last year. I don't know if that. So I'm eating deer jerky, getting ready to, clearing the freezer out, crossing the fingers that I'll be filling it back up soon.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do because I grossly overestimated. I have lots of deer meat left, so I planned on making a lot of jerky, and I just never did. So I have a bunch of 1-pound ground packs, and I shouldn't say a lot, but I don't know.
No time like the present.
Yeah,
20 or so, but I'll have more jerky professionally made this next time because even though I like making it, it's like making beer. It just takes all day.
Yeah, it's another thing on the to-do.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why I was late to the call. I was pressure washing my house, and then Lindsay came out, and she's like, it's 1:15, and you have a podcast at 5:30. I'm like, oh, shit. I'm soaked head to toe.
Nice.
I was like, oh, crap. So then I got to clean up and get changed. And then Skype wouldn't work. So it's perfect.
Yeah. Well,
Did I tell you guys about the hunter access in the national park?
out in Colorado?
Yeah,
No.
I thought that was pretty cool. So Rocky Mountain National Park butts up to some national forest land, and they actually had opened up roads, that are typically closed to the public, so that you could basically drive to a parking lot closer to the national forest and then hike to the national forest to hunt.
Oh.
Like hike through the national park to the national forest to hunt.
So you're allowed to carry a firearm on the park grounds, but not hunt? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, these people, it was bow season.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, they were hiking with bows. And
That's cool.
there's big signs basically telling other guests that, like, if you see anyone hunting in the national park, please report it.
Right.
So, but yeah, it was pretty cool. Because I've known people that have had, access to property adjacent to Cuyahoga Valley, and they basically told those people, no, and in no uncertain terms can you walk across our property to hunt.
Oh, okay.
And I'm also assuming that they're allowing those people to bring their game, if they were to harvest, back through the park.
Yeah.
Which I don't think you're allowed to do. Like, because we've hunted adjacent to the national park, Cuyahoga Valley, and they, said call before you have to call the ranger, and they have to accompany you to go track your game. So
Right. Yeah.
But
Well, that's
I
interesting.
thought that was cool. Yeah.
So what we were going to talk about today, so if you guys have been listening, we did a dove hunt. So we've done some small game. Jeff's been, as he mentioned, he's been out with his squirrel gun doing some squirrel hunting. So we've been doing a little bit of early season small game hunting. And so we got to talking about, how do you not mess up your deer hunting with small game hunting, early season small game hunting. So we thought we'd have a chat about it, see what we can come up with, some ideas on how to do both. We kind of like to be, we're deer hunters, but we kind of like to be generalists and do some small game hunting and get into other things as well. And so how do you, I guess, have your cake and eat it too? So basically, you guys have, did you jot any notes down, or should I start with one? I got a couple key points that I thought of that we can talk about.
Well, my most helpful tip, now this isn't an early season small game hunting tip, but it's the best time to hunt rabbits is after deer season. Rabbit season goes another 3 weeks or 4 weeks after deer season. And if you hunt them then you're not really ruining any deer hunts, because deer season's closed and the deer are going to filter back in plenty of time for next season.
Yeah. That was one of mine that I had written down here, is just do your small game hunting after you've got your deer. After you filled your freezer with deer meat, then switch over to small game. So I think that one's pretty simple. Anybody can do that one, right? As long as you've got property, or you can, public's a different story, right? It might, I don't know, public's public, right? You got other things to contend to with public land. But that brings me to one of my other ideas here is, do your small game hunting on public ground. Find a public place to hunt near you. Do your small game hunting on public, and do your deer hunting on your properties that you have private access to, farms, or if it's your own property or whatever. That way you're not trouncing through the woods doing small game hunting in, September and pushing a bunch of deer out of the woods so that there's nothing around come bow opener or whenever you start hunting each year.
Yeah. Or just do your small game hunting on the more heavily traveled, if all you have is public, do your small game hunting on the more heavily traveled public.
Right.
And then the less traveled public that you have, deer hunt there.
Right.
On the heavily traveled public land, if you're not out there hunting, someone else is. So you might as well get out there and do what you want to do as well.
Yep. And so that kind of brings me to my next point is if you've, like Jeff mentioned, if it's public or if it's private, if you have a big enough chunk of private, right, you can kind of hunt different parts of the property, right? Like a lot of times, I'm thinking like squirrel hunting, right? Deer kind of like that early successional habitat, that young forest, that CRP, right? They like edge, whereas squirrels, they like mature hardwood timber, right? So they're a little bit different habitat. So if you've got a chunk of your property that's good, mature, closed canopy hardwoods, that's probably a good squirrel spot. And that's not to say that you wouldn't see a deer in there, but there might be other areas on your property or other areas on public ground that are better deer hunting and versus areas that are better for, say, squirrel hunting. So you can kind of, again, if you have a big enough chunk of private, right, you can kind of break the property up into, yep, this area over here is hardwood timber. That's a good squirrel spot. I'm going to squirrel hunt over there, and I'm going to stay out of this, overgrown brushy bottom because that's better whitetail habitat. And that's obviously very property specific, right? Like your property has to lay out that way, or and there's other things to take into consideration, right? Maybe you squirrel hunt where the wind is blowing away from the area where you think the deer are going to be, right? Because even if you're not going in there, maybe you send someone in there and it's making them a little nervous, and they might move on to the neighboring property or whatever the case may be. So it's a little bit property specific. And if your property lays out like that, if your property is big enough to do that, but I could definitely see some scenarios. I can envision some scenarios where that's a possibility, right? You've got hardwoods and, a sort of a better whitetail area. You guys have any thoughts on that?
For me, it's basic. Just kind of agreeing with you, I guess. Make sure you're not small game hunting in the bedding area. Without taking for granted that everyone knows, I guess, how to identify a bedding area. But typically it's your thicker, overgrown places where the deer can kind of get out of sight. So those are good rabbit spots. But like Jeff said, you got time to rabbit hunt after deer season. When you're looking at squirrel, the squirrels don't really hang out in that stuff. But basically try to identify where your deer bed and stay away from there. Like you said, keep your wind away from there. And I think it kind of depends what your goals are for your deer season. If you're trying to harvest a very mature whitetail, your best bet would probably be not to small game hunt anywhere near them, because those deer are just too smart. So if you're tromping anywhere around, unless you got 1,000 acres or something, but if you're on any type of a smaller private parcel, any activity, even checking trail cameras can push those deer onto the neighbors, just because they do not like people. So it just kind of depends, I think, what your goals are as to what. If you're just trying to shoot does, they're a little more tolerant of people tromping through their bedroom or gunfire, they tend to stick around where what they know.
Right.
But an old wily buck, if you're blasting away at squirrels, he may decide that's enough and just go somewhere else.
Want to pause here for a quick second and talk about our other sponsor, Monster Whitetail Grub. So they are an Ohio deer feed and deer mineral company, and we really like them because we've just had good luck with the product. We've had success with the product where other products haven't worked for us, or we've done some side-by-side comparison, and the deer just seem to favor Monster Whitetail Grub over other stuff. That's not to say other stuff doesn't work, but our experience has been Monster Whitetail Grub typically gives you that little extra edge. And I'll tell you, we've had some listeners send us some send us some pictures, trail camera pictures of after they started using Monster Whitetail Grub, and we've seen some monster bucks come in from listeners that have started using Monster Whitetail Grub. So we like it. Some of you listeners have been using it and are liking it. So if you want to try feed, if a deer feed is something you use as a hunting strategy, then I would encourage you to try Monster Whitetail Grub. There's a link in the show notes to get a hold of them and buy some of their stuff and give it a try. Now, back to the episode. So that kind of leads me to my next one, which is sort of similar to hunting small game on public, is you can use different properties for different needs, right? Like, for example, I've got a property that I only have squirrel permission on, right? I could deer hunt there, but there's already people that deer hunt there, and that's an example of the front half of the property is more that overgrown kind of brushy. I mean, I could go in there and I'm sure find some squirrels, but I know, they told me that that's where the deer, I've never met the deer hunters there, but the property owner told me that, that's kind of where they focus. And so I stick to the back half of the property, and that's all closed canopy, hardwood forest. And so but I only squirrel hunt there. And then I've got other properties, that you guys have heard us talk about, or Grandpa's farm and things like that, where I deer hunt. And so that's another strategy you could use, right? Because we've talked in the past, a lot of times it's easier to get squirrel permission, right? I don't care if you go back there and shoot some squirrels, So if you're wanting to get out and do some squirrel hunting or some small game hunting, maybe try to find a different property, right? And just knock on some doors, ask some people at church, at work, hey, you got a couple acres or whatever, could I come over and squirrel hunt? And there's a fairly good chance, I would say, that as long as they're not like totally mortified, because I've seen some people that have squirrel stickers on the back of their car, so I wouldn't ask those people, but they might say, yeah, sure, come on over. And because the one thing I found, this is a little bit of a tangent, but anybody that has, what's substantial, right? But anybody that has like more than a suburb lot, right? They've got a chunk of property. They tend to like the outdoors. They understand the circle of life, if you will, right? And they're I guess what I'm getting at is somebody doesn't go buy a 15-acre chunk of property just because, right? They either grew up in the country and they like that, or maybe they grew up in the city and they want to get away from that, but you typically don't just fall into a big chunk of property or a piece of property. And so they're not going to be totally blown out of the water, caught off guard by somebody asking, hey, can I come squirrel hunt? Odds are it's not the first time they've been asked to, somebody's asked them to come hunt their property in some fashion.
Right.
So that Jake, what you were saying earlier, that also gave me another one that I jotted down here as you were talking. One thing you could do And I've not done this because you got to kind of be close to your property to do this. But if it's your own property, you could certainly do this. And Dr. Grant Woods from Growing Deer talks about this, is sort of acclimating your deer. So, he talks about how all summer long they're using trucks and or side-by-sides, tractors, in the food plots. They're running trucks up and down the road system. They're going to check trail cameras with trucks or side-by-sides. And the deer sort of get used to that level of intrusion. They, it's kind of like deer at the parks, right? Like they know, okay, these people are going to walk on this trail, but as long as I stay over here, I'm fine. But the minute you step foot off the trail, they're like, oop, that's different. I'm gone, sort of thing, right? So you can kind of acclimate your deer to your presence in a sense, by using your vehicle all the time to go check cameras, or, he and I don't know, like I said, I've not done this. He talks about using a vehicle to access stands and check cameras versus walking, because somebody walking through the woods is danger to a deer, whereas a vehicle is a vehicle, right? As long as I can sort of bound out of the field or just over this knoll or whatever, and once the vehicle drives off, I'll come right back out and continue to feed in this food plot. I don't have any, firsthand experience with that, but you could kind of follow the logic and see how that would make sense, right? You can see some, maybe some examples of that. Like I said, with deer in like the parks or something, the metro parks or something like that, where they don't so much mind as long as you continue on down the trail and, you don't stop and gawk or whatever, they're fine with human presence in pretty close proximity. But once you start, maybe approaching the deer, then they kind of freak out and get out of there. But
well, if you talk to people that do farming and stuff, they'll say that they can drive the fields in their tractor and the deer just stand there and look at them.
Right.
They're like our grandpa's farm, for example. You talk to the guys that actively farm it, they're like, oh, there's deer everywhere. We're planting the fields, cutting the fields. We see 15, 20 deer.
Yeah.
But then you go out there to hunt it and you don't see any.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they're clearly used to the tractors, and that doesn't make them blow out of there. But if you're not careful walking in, you don't see them.
That's a good point, too. Like with a tractor especially, I would think, because in the fall, a tractor can kind of be like a dinner bell for a deer, right? There's bound to be some spilled grain or some stuff that got missed or, whatever, and so hearing a tractor running could almost be, like I said, a dinner bell or an attractant that it kind of cues a deer like, hey, I should go over, and once that noise kind of moves away, I should go over there and see if there's some corn or some beans on the ground over there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hot tip. They say, so I've heard, and I've never had the chance to actually do it because I've schedule-wise, but they say the day after the field's harvested, that evening, the deer pour out for the spilled grain. So,
yeah,
after they cut the corn, after they cut the beans, like the 24 hours after that, they say is the best time to hunt that field because they come out. Obviously, the combines are getting more and more effective and spilling less and less, but there's still some.
Yep.
So they say that's a very good hunting strategy, especially if you're hunting ag fields or ag land.
Yeah. So I've got one more on my list. Do you guys have any others we want to cover before, or have we covered it pretty well?
Well, I wanted to kind of cover a common misconception. I can't count how many times I've heard the story of, the big bucks are in the woods or, in the oak flats, until squirrel season starts, and those darn squirrel hunters, come in and push the deer into the thicker stuff.
Yeah.
And that's more or less a misconception that, because also right around that same time that squirrel season starts, antlers start to harden, and bucks prefer open areas when they're in velvet because velvet antlers are very tender.
Right.
Like they can't be hitting those on branches, and there's a lot of nerves in that velvet, and they're very, very tender to the deer. So
Yeah,
they can't really be in thick cover. So it's more or less that the antlers are going hard and they can get into the thick cover, and has a whole lot less to do with that there's squirrel hunters in the woods, because there's really not that many squirrel hunters out there.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, like you said, that's living tissue on the antlers, right? And so they can't be, with tissue that's hardening off, calcifying, hardening off into bone underneath, and so it's I've read that too, that they don't like to be banging their antlers into stuff when they're in velvet.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen it firsthand where I have trail camera photos of large bucks in open timber, and I know there's not squirrel hunters going into those woods, but
Right.
the bucks disappear, right around the beginning of September, mid-September. And
Yeah, I mean,
because they're using a different part of their range.
Right. People talk about that shift, right? When the antlers, when they go hard horn, there's a shift, right? Like you said, they move into a different area. And then I've also heard people talk, like in crop country, right? When the crops come out, there can be another shift, right? They've had cover from a cornfield, food, from soybeans or whatever nearby. And when all that stuff comes out, now it's sort of a barren wasteland for a deer once the spilled grain gets cleaned up. And so they shift to a different part of their habitat, their home range. So my last one is and this kind of goes back to Jacob's statement about, hunting big giant bucks, mature bucks, is just don't worry about it. Right? I mean, just if you want to hunt a specific deer and you want to shoot the biggest deer in the area, then yeah, you probably need to worry about it, and you don't want to be tromping through your best deer areas. But if you just want to go deer hunt and small game hunt, then just go small game hunt. And the deer aren't just going to like totally avoid the area for the entire season, right? If you go out and shoot, if you're out there every day and then like in the morning you're squirrel hunting and in the evening you're deer hunting, okay, that might cause you issues. But squirrel one week, one weekend, and deer hunt the next. There'll be deer around, there'll be does around. Just just go hunt. I think I don't know. I don't get me wrong. I like shooting big giant bucks, but I just think we've kind of gone too far to the on the big giant bucks scale, right? Everybody's so focused on big giant bucks. I'd kind of like to see the pendulum swing back a little bit, where it's more about just going out and having fun and shooting something that gets you excited, but maybe it's not the biggest deer in the county, or and so I guess that's my last tip, is just don't worry about it. Go hunt, have fun. Thoughts?
I would agree with you. Like you said, if you got a 200 incher on trail camera and you think you have a chance of him sticking around, you might not want to go squirrel hunt. But outside of that, hunting is hunting. I don't know. If you do it right, I guess you probably could use small game hunting to your advantage. Because if you small game hunt somewhere and push the deer somewhere else, that might give you a better chance to get them at a different part of your property.
Right.
You got to kind of think about it. And if you are someone who hunts public land, as we've said before, hunting public land is more hunting in the sense of what other people are doing versus what the animals are doing. So if you're someone who hunts public land, and you know that people small game hunt, think about the common areas, like you said, the big oak flats, the stuff like that, where they're going to be looking for squirrels, and don't focus your deer time. Try to get away from those places.
Yep.
But I'm with you. I think people need to get back to just hunting. Like you said, don't get me wrong, I love big giant bucks, just like the next guy. I like seeing pictures. I like seeing them. I like shooting them, whatever. But I think as a whole, we need people to get back to just hunting, enjoying the outdoors, having fun, in order to continue to keep this passion of ours strong and thriving, because we're losing members, we're losing people because it's not fun anymore, because everybody's trying to, shoot the big giant bucks. And if you don't shoot big giant bucks, you're no hunter.
Right.
And we got to get that attitude changed, because the reality is not that many guys shoot, 170, 180 plus inch bucks. It's just not realistic.
Yeah. There's not that many around, right? I mean,
right.
They're exciting because they're rare, right? So, I mean, even with good management, they're going to be rare just from what am I trying to say? Like a population dynamic, right? You're going to have the most 1.5-year-olds, right? Because they've had less time to get sick and die, get hit by a car, get killed by whatever, a coyote, break their leg, whatever the case, or shot by a hunter, right? And so there's just not that many around. So if everybody's trying to shoot the biggest, giantest deer, then you go years without shooting a deer, and that's no fun. Right. That is no fun.
It blows my mind to hear people, and I guess, if that's all they're after is big bucks, that's good for them. But it blows my mind to hear people say that they ate their tags, they didn't shoot any deer. It's like, you've got to be kidding me.
I would rather have them buying a tag and eating it than not buying a tag.
Yeah, that's true.
But if buying a tag and eating it year after year starts to wear on you, and you're like, I'm not going to do this anymore, then that's when I have issue. I don't have a problem if a guy just wants to hunt mature deer and that's his thing, and he buys a tag every year. More power to you. But if you're doing that because that's what you see on TV, and you start thinking, man, this is an awful lot of work and an awful lot of money, and I never have anything to show for it, hey, man, lower your standards.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, this is a little shorter one, so hopefully you guys like this episode. Like I said, it was a conversation that we were having amongst the three of us, and thought, well, why don't we record this and share it as an episode? So next week, I think, will be an episode with Mike Tonkovich from the Division of Wildlife. He's the deer program administrator, so that should be a good one. So make sure you tune in next week for that episode. And good conversation. All right. So like I said, hopefully you found that helpful. Hopefully there's some good tips in there for you. And like I said at the beginning, hopefully you've had some success on opening weekend. If you did, send us your pictures. We want to see them. We want this to kind of be a community where we can all share hunting stories and share successes, share lessons learned, share failures, right? I mean, people can learn from our mistakes. So that's one thing, we try to be pretty transparent about things that we've done well and things that, we could have done better. So hopefully you guys maybe don't repeat some of the same mistakes we do. So send us your photos, send us your stories. We can repost them if you want. let us know in the post if it's something that you'd be okay with us sharing to the rest of the community, or just get involved in the Ohio Huntsman Facebook community and share your photos and your stories yourself. That's another great way to get in touch with the community of Ohio Huntsmen throughout the state. So with that, I think that's it. Like I said, good luck in the deer woods and any other hunting you're doing this fall. And thanks for listening.